Hi, and welcome back to Love Bombed. This is the podcast where we talk about relationships, emotional patterns, and the things people usually realize too late. In the last episode, we talked about what it feels like when someone enters your life with intense attention, consistency, reassurance, and the kind of certainty that feels almost impossible not to trust. I'm Jen from Love Bombed, and today I want to talk about what happens next, the shift. Usually it's not one dramatic moment where everything suddenly changes. It's subtle. The good morning texts become less frequent. Everything goes from feeling intentional to inconsistent. The reassurance becomes harder to reach. And before you realize it, you're waiting for the version of them you first met to return. The beginning felt so real. You start explaining the changes away. You tell yourself they're overwhelmed, distracted, maybe going through something, and that they need space. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop chasing the beginning of the relationship and start paying attention to the reality of it. A healthy connection is not built on confusion, withdrawal, or constantly trying to get back to who someone used to be. That's what makes this dynamic so confusing. You're not grieving something that always felt unhealthy. You're grieving the loss of a version of someone who once made you feel deeply chosen. Sometimes the hardest realization is this. The beginning may never have been sustainable in the first place. Not because your feelings weren't real. Not because the connection felt fake. The connection can feel incredibly powerful in the beginning. The attention comes easily and the affection feels effortless. Everything moves quickly, almost like the intimacy was being accelerated. Sometimes what's being created isn't a stable relationship yet, but a fantasy version of one built on heightened emotion, constant attention, and accelerated closeness. The reality is that a genuine connection requires far more than intensity alone. It requires steadiness, consistency, and the ability to continue showing up once the excitement settles. Time eventually reveals whether the relationship was built on emotional consistency or temporary intensity. Sometimes what hurts the most is realizing you weren't asking for too much. You were asking for the same energy that was given to you in the beginning. You weren't asking for perfection or constant attention every second of the day. You were asking for the same effort, communication, and presence that made the connection feel secure in the first place. Slowly, you start feeling the difference between someone pursuing you and someone sustaining a relationship with you. Pursuit is often driven by emotion in the moment. It lives in excitement, anticipation, and constant reassurance. Sustaining a relationship asks for something quieter, communication during difficult moments, emotional presence without the adrenaline of the beginning. An effort that continues even after comfort settles in. That's why the beginning of a relationship can feel so powerful, while the middle reveals whether the foundation underneath it is actually stable. Attraction may create the connection, but consistency is what determines whether the relationship can last. When the intensity starts fading, you can find yourself working harder and harder, trying to get back to the version of the relationship that makes you feel so secure in the first place. Without realizing it right away, the relationship slowly stops feeling mutual and starts feeling like something you're trying to maintain alone. You start replaying conversations in your head, wondering if you said something wrong, questioning whether you became too available, too invested, or too needy. Small changes in communication suddenly feel enormous because you're comparing them to the consistency that existed in the beginning. Sometimes people find themselves working harder to maintain the relationship after the intensity fades than they ever did in the beginning. The security that once felt natural starts feeling unpredictable. Not realizing the version of the relationship that made you feel safest may only have existed in the beginning. The relationship starts feeling less safe and more unpredictable. One of the most painful questions people ask themselves after experiencing this dynamic is, if it felt so real in the beginning, why couldn't they maintain it? Honestly, sometimes there isn't one simple answer. For some people, the beginning of the relationship feels exciting because it's driven by novelty, validation, fantasy, or emotional adrenaline. The pursuit feels intensely stimulating. Something often shifts once a relationship begins, requiring steadiness instead of intensity. Consistency asks for more than chemistry. It requires presence during ordinary moments, accountability when things become difficult, and communication that continues even after the excitement of the beginning fades. Having a connection with someone becomes less about constant intensity and more about the ability to remain present, regulated, and vulnerable over time. Unfortunately, not everyone has developed these skills. Some people are deeply uncomfortable with emotional stability because chaos and intensity feel more familiar to them than a calm connection. For some, emotional inconsistency became normalized long before adulthood. Attention may have felt unpredictable, love may have felt conditional, and intense highs and lows became associated with feeling valued, wanted, or connected. As a result, calm and stable relationships can sometimes feel unfamiliar or even understimulating to people who unconsciously associate love with intensity. A calm connection may feel comforting to one person while feeling unfamiliar to someone else. Sometimes the absence of chaos gets mistaken for the absence of love, simply because peace doesn't create the same adrenaline as uncertainty. Unpredictability can create intense psychological attachment. The anxiety, the anticipation, the relief when reassurance finally returns. That cycle becomes emotionally consuming. As a result, a calmer connection can sometimes feel unfamiliar by comparison. Not because healthy love lacks depth or passion, but because stability does not create the same emotional extremes as inconsistency. A healthy connection usually feels steadier than it feels addictive. Others may genuinely care about you, but they confuse being emotionally expressive in the moment with being consistently dependable over time. Those are very different things. Some people also unintentionally build relationships around idealization. But sometimes you weren't actually being seen fully, you were being imagined. There's a difference between someone loving the reality of you and someone loving how you made them feel in the beginning. In the beginning, they're seeing the potential of the relationship, the fantasy of it, how the connection makes them feel, and what they hope the relationship could become. Eventually, real relationships move past fantasy. Emotional maturity starts mattering when the connection becomes real instead of imagined. Over time, the excitement naturally starts to settle. Daily life begins entering the relationship. Stress, misunderstandings, and differences become more visible. Responsibilities, routines, distance, and triggers also start surfacing in ways they usually don't during the beginning stages of a connection. Intensity can exist without stability. Affection can exist without a meaningful connection. Early chemistry alone cannot sustain a healthy relationship over time. Real connection reveals itself in the quieter moments. inconsistency, communication, accountability, and the ability to stay present even after the novelty fades. Healthy relationships require more than attraction and intensity. They require patience, effort, self awareness, accountability, and mutual care. Sometimes the issue is not that someone never cared. They may have genuinely felt connected in the beginning. The problem is that feelings alone are not enough to sustain a healthy relationship long term. Some people want the experience of love without fully understanding the responsibility of maintaining it consistently over time. At some point, we have to normalize the idea that not everyone is ready for a relationship simply because they want one. Relationships involve real people, real emotions, and real attachment. There are people entering relationships with genuine intentions who are looking for stability, consistency, honesty, and security. That is why emotional unavailability, unresolved wounds, or constantly chasing relationship highs can become so damaging in relationships. Even unintentional inconsistency can leave a long-lasting impact behind. Healthy relationships are sustained through communication during stressful seasons of life, intentional connection after the excitement of pursuit fades, and continued effort once comfort begins replacing novelty. Some people are very good at creating connections in the beginning, but they don't always know how to sustain them once a relationship becomes stable and familiar. Honestly, that was something I didn't fully understand until I started researching for this podcast. For a long time, I assumed anyone who love bombed someone intentionally set out to do it from the beginning, as if they had an ulterior motive. But the more I researched relationship dynamics, attachment patterns, emotional validation, and intensity based connections, the more I realized that human behavior is sometimes more complicated than that. Some people are intentionally manipulative, while others lack the emotional maturity required to sustain a healthy relationship long term. They may become deeply attached to the excitement of pursuit, attention, and the intensity, yet struggle when the relationship begins requiring consistency, accountability, communication, and grounded connection. None of that excuses the impact their actions can have on another person. However, understanding the difference can completely change the way someone processes the experience afterwards. The transition from intensity to stability is where many relationships either deepen or quietly begin unraveling. Not because the beginning was necessarily fake. In some cases, people simply are not prepared for what real connection requires after the excitement settles. That realization can be painful. Realizing someone may have cared about you and still lack the ability to sustain the kind of relationship you are trying to build can leave a person questioning everything: the connection, the memories, the beginning, the version of the relationship that once felt so convincing. That realization can also become the moment someone finally stops confusing intensity with love, inconsistency with passion, and temporary closeness with a genuine connection. Sometimes healing begins the moment people stop chasing who someone was in the beginning and starts paying attention to who they consistently became over time. Next time on Love Bombed, we're talking about why people ignore red flags, rationalize inconsistency, and hold on to potential long after the relationship starts feeling safe. Want to share your love bomb story anonymously? Send it to lovebombedpod@gmail.com or submit it through the link in the show notes. I'm Jen from Love Bombed, and I'll see you in the next episode.